Hey, what's up? David Brazos Valley Strength. And today, we're going to be talking about sinking the bar on the bench press. So, if you're at all plugged in the powerlifting world, specifically in the IPF or drug-tested side of things, you'll know this is kind of ironic timing that I'm releasing this video right now. I've been planning this video for about a month or so, and maybe I got lucky in that I'm filming this video right now rather than about a week ago, because the IPF just released new rules for the coming year. One of those rules seems to be specifically targeting the sink on the bench press, at least to some degree. So I'm going to read the rule just so that we are on the same page as far as what we're actually talking about. I'll give my interpretation and maybe just kind of a, broad breakdown, and then we'll move on from there. So it's now against the rules to utilize upper body thrust to initiate upward movement of the bar from the chest. So that seems to be pretty clearly targeting sinking the bar, at least on some level. And within this video, my plan was already going to be to talk about sinking on a broad range of styles. One of those being essentially this: using your legs to get more acceleration, get some pop off of your chest, out of the bottom of the bench press. I think this is still a very good technique, and I'm gonna proceed with this video, probably interjecting here and there where I think the IPF rules may be going against what I'm talking about. Everybody else here, if you're just lifting in the gym, competing in other federations, I think all of this stuff is good. I'm gonna be clear here. I think this is a bad rule. I think that one of the biggest issues with this is that it's going to really create gray areas. That regardless of what you think, if it's cheating, I'm even gonna talk about how I do think that this strategy is really, really beneficial to hopefully make the efficiency of the lift go way up. So, if you think it's cheating, whatever, right? But it has been allowed up until now. But how do we define what is too much sink if we're saying that sinking the bar is not allowed? I don't think it's that. It seems to be specifically pushing from your legs maybe, but specifically from your body to assist the bar to get going. Where's the line there? What I'm gonna talk about here is that there's two styles, and that one of those styles doesn't really use too much of this upper body thrust. And I think that that's a good strategy for a lot of people. But I also think that there's a lot of people that kind of start blending that line. And I don't know where that line is going to be, and I don't think really anybody does. So any rule that's going to be difficult to enforce and is just going to be subjective on the platform, that's a really, really bad rule. So that's kind of my main issue. The secondary issue that I think is absolutely true is this does seem to be targeting smaller women in particular. So the elbow depth rule seems to be coming from that in the first place. If you're unaware, the IPF, I guess it was last year, 2 years ago, recently, updated their rules in an effort to make the sport more palatable to a number of people who, like to complain about things. I don't agree with any of these rules is really what it comes down to. The rule with elbow depth was that the elbow had to get in line with the shoulder to meet full range of motion in the bench press. Where most people's thought is where that was coming from, particularly small women, tend to be targeted oftentimes with some online ridicule. That people will see these high arches and short ranges of motion and criticize those as not being mainstream enough or something. So that was the IPF's way of trying to limit that. Now, there were a lot of other ways that I think that could have been done if that needed to happen. It was a bad rule, but a lot of women started sinking the bar to overcome that and started implementing a lot of these strategies. And I think a lot of those women ended up looking significantly stronger, bench pressing more weight than they did previously. And that actually is a large part of my point here in favor of the sink. So I'm gonna proceed with this video, kind of ignoring the current IPF stuff. Like I said, I'll mention it here and there where I think it's relevant and where the rules I think will land with the stuff that I'm saying. But I wanted to make the video because not everybody here competes in the IPF. I'll even say, depending on the implementation of these rules, I do think that this could be enough to make me go back to the USAPL. It's just such a dumb rule. There's a lot of dumb rules that came out. Me sinking the bar and getting pop off my body dramatically makes me stay healthier. Like it changes the way the bench press feels for me so much. I'm not interested in fighting this. So we'll see where that line ends up. Maybe I can continue competing in Powerlifting America, my IPF federation. We'll see. But I think this is a dumb, bad rule, and I'm not really interested in playing this game, is really what it comes down to. So we'll move on and we'll talk about syncing. I think the starting point, like I said earlier, is that I don't really think syncing is all that complicated. That's the reason why I haven't had a video on this before. Like I would struggle, you'll see that I will struggle at least a little bit, to break down how to sync. Most of this video is going to be the things that I think get in the way of syncing and that will make the sync less efficient or make you lose your leverage over the bar and lose your ability to actually get the bar on top of your shoulders and just kind of maintain tension overall. I think so much of this actually comes from the current body of content, right? People like me making videos. I have often said that one of the problems with people who become popular, at least for certain lifts, making these videos are people who are generally well leveraged for those lifts. And so we can use like hyper specific techniques. I talked about this in my deadlift video with the flexion versus protraction, and a lot of the language that we use around upper back stuff I think has often been counterproductive for the broad populations of lifters. I feel that way for bench press. I have a previous video talking about how close grip, probably, or a closer grip rather than max width, should probably be utilized significantly more in the population of powerlifters. But there is progress, there are ways that people can really change their bench presses, very high arches, very wide grips, a lot of internal rotation, that if you are well leveraged for that lift, you can really game the system there. And the IPF, was trying to get rid of that stuff. I disagree with that. But so much of the content, and when I'm talking to people, coaching lifters, that's kind of the stuff. That's like the background of bench press information that almost everybody is coming from. And that stuff, I think, gets in the way of the sync. So a few definitions to start off here. Maybe even backing up to rules that do apply to everybody. Syncing the bar is allowed. Heaving the bar is not allowed. And this is somewhere that I have had lifters in competitions get red lights, and I have argued with judges. People don't seem to understand this rule very well. A heave in the bench press, regardless of your touch, you could do a soft touch on the bench. A heave is going to be any downward motion after the press command to get momentum. It doesn't even matter. Like the momentum part doesn't matter. Any downward motion after the press is going to be considered a heave. So you can sync the bar if you're told press. You could use your body. Currently, that's allowed except in the IPF. You could do a soft touch if you're told press. If the bar sinks and then goes, that's a heave. So that is allowed. You can just think any downward motion after the press. So syncing the bar, there's no limit to how far that bar can sink and still be allowable. There's no like, now it becomes a heave line. That's an important definition. Also, I'm gonna be talking about internal and maybe to some degree external rotation within this. It's gonna be important because internal rotation, you can think your thumb internally rotates, so that internally rotates your humerus, that flares the elbows. Sometimes that's counterintuitive for people, that if we say internal rotation, that ends up flaring the arm more. If I say external rotation, I'm almost never actually talking about getting into true external rotation of the humerus. I'm basically saying relative external rotation, kind of just biasing away from a very internally rotated position. So if I say we're moving towards external rotation, I'm essentially saying we're just like not so internally rotated. So I do think a lot of those things need to be clear within the way that we're approaching this. Now, the final kind of definition thing here is I'm gonna be talking syncing versus soft touch. We're gonna focus on the sync. Sync is basically any sort of depth that we get from our chest, but there's gray lines there, as we've already talked about. So I'm gonna try to differentiate this at least enough for us to be able to visually see where the legs are kind of the differentiation in my mind. If we're relaxing the legs as the bar is getting in my chest, I'm gonna call that the deeper sync, and then the softer sync, maybe we'll see what I say. That's going to be the other style. Currently, I think that style very likely will continue to be allowed in the IPF. So it's hard to visually see those things sometimes, but essentially that's my line. It's not binary. It's not like we're either syncing it a whole lot or we're not syncing it and there's a soft touch. There is a very big range within all of that. So I'm gonna talk about those styles a lot throughout the video, But that's a big part of this, is kind of finding what fits you and what makes all of this work well. So to demonstrate the softer sink version here, I think it's actually pretty easy. You can see in this video that I'm letting the bar sit on my chest. I'm basically fully taking my arms off the bar as much as I reasonably could here. And you can see the bar is sinking into my body, but my body really is not being displaced all that much. So just like a softer touch on the bench, we should still be trying to drive into the bar and meet the bar and maintain our tension, maintain our rigidity against the barbell. We're just using our body to be able to support the weight of the bar a little bit more, which I think gives us some distinct advantages. For one, I think that pausing in competition is almost always easier for people who are sinking the bar, at least a little bit. That pause, those longer pauses, just don't really seem to affect people. People who do a softer touch, I think pretty broadly, we can see that those people tend to struggle a little bit more in competition with the slightly longer press commands and all of that stuff. It's more fatiguing. It's just hard to hold that press down there on your chest and keep it motionless. With the sink, we can descend a little bit faster, we can get a little bit more of that stretch shortening cycle within all of this, and just have it feel a little bit easier from the bottom. We also shouldn't be relaxing our arms so much that they're fully coming off the bar like this. I don't think that anybody will reasonably be able to do that, but you can see the bar sinks into our chests with the arms relaxing enough to get it there, and we get a little bit of pop, even without the legs moving a whole lot. The second style is the style that the IPF seems to be targeting. So this one, we are relaxing the legs a little bit. I don't know that I can come up with a specific number. I'm sure it's different for many people. I would say for myself, this is a style that I really like. I'm probably relaxing my legs 25% or so. So there is clearly a little bit of change in my posture with the bench. My rib cage comes down a little bit. I do relax some at the bottom in an effort to actually propel the bar off my chest. But I think that this one is the one that probably everybody, whenever they start trying to sink the bar, gravitates to, that they're trying to overdo these kind of things, especially, we'll talk about it, with too much internal rotation, and it ends up just feeling very, very sloppy and lacking control. This is not where I think people should start. But to feel out where you want to be with these things, I do think that probably all of those extra technique things probably get in the way. I talk a lot about how gym bros seem to be able to figure this stuff out very easily, very, very well. But you'll see a lot of these guys bouncing the bar off their chest or sinking and getting a lot of propulsion. And like a lot of times bench pressing good amounts of weight, you know? And us as powerlifters, if our goal is to move the most weight as possible, I think that those strategies should be something that we're a little bit more willing to employ and not always going to like the most extreme version of the internal rotation and high arch and all that stuff that really just doesn't fit super, super well across populations. So let's take a step back and let's look at the arm angle stuff, especially with the dramatic sink. So we've been talking about internal rotation, and I think that hopefully you can see it with me, especially on one of my arms doesn't have super good ability to internally rotate, but you can demonstrate this, you can illustrate it pretty easily yourself, especially at very long ranges of motion. If you're trying to get your hands all the way in line with your body and keep that touch point very, very high, most people really do not have that range of motion to be able to maintain the integrity of those positions without stuff really dumping forward. That I can't continue to go down towards my chest and maintain control over the bar, especially from the side angle. You can see the elbow moving back behind the barbell, and that is going to be significantly harder to overcome with a wider grip when we don't really have leverage over the bar to get it back. With the closer grip, we're in a little bit more external rotation, relative external rotation compared to that internal rotation, and we tend to be able to maintain that position a whole lot better. Even when it sinks, our elbows will move back a little bit, but almost always that press gets things back organized where we need to be in the first place to be able to have leverage over that bar. And so that, I think, is the barrier for so many people. That so many people have been taught internal rotation, bulldog grip, short range of motion, internal rotation maximizes leverages, all of that stuff. I disagree with that on a population level, and I think it makes a lot of these things harder. And I think the starting point for most people to figure out a sink on bench press is just go in your warm-ups and play around with it, kind of bro out, right? Try to get the bar into your chest, let it sink a little bit, try to find that pop, try to find a natural way that feels like you have control over the barbell without actively relaxing. And then you can find the version that really fits you. And it'll take a little bit of practice, of course, right? Like it'll feel awkward if you're relaxing too much, and it'll get better over time. But I think that really just approaching it, trying to find that pop, essentially trying to cheat the bar off your chest, I genuinely think is a really good strategy to just learn this style in the first place. So that's, I think, broadly the main thing that gets in the way of most people finding a good sink. That when they're starting off with bench, they're so exposed to this totally different strategy outside of what I'm saying, and they just like never create an opportunity for these things to fit. But within that, I wanted to take a second here to highlight a couple of women, especially at the SBD Austin event that I was at just recently. Jamie Fisher and Meg Scanlon. Meg Scanlon, obviously super, super good lifter heading here into Sheffield. And again, this stuff is gonna show up at Sheffield. So we'll see how much of this video actually ends up, how these rules are enforced on this very high level. These two lifters are both people who used to do a much softer touch, wider grip, short range of motion styles, and had to adapt to the IPF bench rules. And they have excelled with this different style. So all of the stuff that I've been saying about a wider grip and internal rotation and all of that kind of stuff usually being a barrier, I think is true, but it's on a spectrum that if you're built like me, if you're a 5'11", 200 plus pound male with long arms and all of that stuff, very likely those things are not going to reduce the range of motion enough to actually allow you to limit your range of motion in a way that actually is productive. So a lot of these other strategies are going to be better. Now, for some of these smaller lifters who have kind of shorter arms, the combination of those things together seems to be really, really great, that they're able to still maintain leverages, that the extra range of motion from the sink isn't so much they lose control over the barbell, and they get that extra pop from their body. And they're really able to accelerate the bar and have an easier time holding the bar on their chest and have really excelled because of it. And I think that even within like the sport of powerlifting and like arguing for viewer-friendly concepts here, it blows my mind that we want everybody to fit this like total uniform box, right? That even like a sumo versus conventional argument feels super dumb, that we want everybody to lift the exact same way for viewer friendliness and we're taking away celebrations and all of that stuff. I think it is insane. And this is a version of that. Like this looks like such a good, cool technique. It's cool to see people using these different strategies. And I think that these lifters still fit a good sink for all of the reasons that I mentioned. So there's a spectrum, right? Like if you're a long arm lifter, all that, you may have to take a closer grip to be able to maintain that stuff. If you're a much shorter arm lifter and a good arch, you may come back into it. But I think that there probably is a much larger body of lifters that fit the sink on some level than are really gonna get max value from the much softer touch. But one of the main things that ends up being problematic for a lot of people is the butt. That people will say that with the sink, and especially the versions where they relax their legs a little bit more, that tends to be problematic. They feel their butt coming up too much. They're trying to pop the bar and they feel their hips rising. To me, that's not a sink issue on its own. It just goes back to concepts of leg drive and the arch and all of that in the first place. If you do have issues with that, I would encourage you to watch my video on foot position. I made a video talking about feet being further out or more tucked behind you and how those things can potentially work for larger, smaller lifters, where the arch comes from, how to create leg drive. That's the video, right? I don't think the concepts here really change. I'm relaxing my legs, like I said, maybe 25% or so, and my butt doesn't come up. I think that if it does, you're probably relaxing too much, but you also just never set your arch all that well in the first place. You never set your leg drive all that well in the first place. But I do think it is one of the more common issues that many of my lifters have, especially as they're learning to get a little bit more pop off their chest, that they'll tell me, I feel great with this amount of pop, but my butt always comes up. And my response is like, yeah, maybe you can't relax all that much. So if you're relaxing so much that your legs relaxing your legs so much that your butt is always coming off the bench, just keep a little bit more tension. You can still relax it in the bar into your chest some, but there has to be a sweet spot there that ultimately I think will end up being the stronger press anyway. So all this video here, and I probably haven't given a super good recommendation on how to sink. Hopefully you have maybe a better understanding of like what's going wrong in the first place, but I think I can close the video out with some variations that will help you find that intuitive way to actually sink the bar into your chest. So I actually do already have this video made. 3-count bench press, feet up bench, and the close grip bench press are my 3 top variations for the sinking touch bench press. If you want the full version of that, you can find the best variations for the soft touch already. But as a quick overview here, the 3-count bench press tends to be a really, really good one for people trying to sink the bar because it helps people commit, that they can find all of those nuances about how much that they can sink the bar into their chest and still get pop. They also can commit to sinking the bar a little bit deeper if they're having trouble actually committing to that. There's time down there. They can add awareness and they can learn to use their body to really propel the bar off their chest. The 3-count bench is excellent for the sinking bench press. Not because it's harder, most of the time it just brings out the best version of that sink. Feet up bench press is kind of the opposite. Feet up bench takes away the legs. So whether you're somebody who does relax the legs at least a little bit when the bar's on your chest or not, feet up bench press is great for making sure people understand how much control they need to maintain. We can't relax our arms all the way. We can't just collapse the whole body. The feet up bench forces us to maintain enough tension, and then we can integrate that. We can find the tension that actually works to maintain control, then we add the legs and we can probably relax our legs a little bit more, but it gets a good balance for the rigidity and control that we need in our upper body, and then our legs can add a little bit more pop to it. The close grip bench, as I've talked about all through this video, biases us away from internal rotation to a little bit more of a neutral position. It also allows us to touch a little bit lower on our chest, which usually allows people to get a little bit more of that sink and pop. And that can be a great variation to find maybe a strategy that's kind of outside of your current biases towards a wider grip internal rotation. So some of the things just may feel more natural. And then you may find some version maybe in between those things, or that slightly closer grip ends up working for you anyway. But it tends to bring out, again, a lot of the good things that tend to work with the sink in the first place. So should you try sinking the bar? Yeah, probably. I think that most people probably benefit at least a little bit from some degree of sink. Now, it remains to be seen what these rules within the IPF are actually going to look like and how they're going to be implemented and enforced. I just don't know. I think that a lot of people probably will do better with the kind of extra leg drive version of the sink. I actually think that more often than not, that's a strategy, at least to some degree, that many, many people should be using, and especially more people right now than it seems to be. So try it. Right? Try some of these strategies. I think especially if you look at yourself and you see that you're somebody who is extra wide with the bench, trying to touch really high and trying to internally rotate the arms, I would bet that on a population level, many of you would be better off with a more natural grip, sinking the bar, and those current strategies that work much, much better for a much smaller population within powerlifting are just not all that great for everybody. So if you did like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.